Good morning, Life Point Church, and welcome back to day 2 in our lesson. Yesterday we were talking about Abram and the decisions that he had to make and what was going to happen. So we understand that Abram was leaving his home country, and it was an idolatrous nation of the Chaldees, and they were not doing the right things, and so Abram was called out of that, and we can thank God for the calling, but we do also know that he took his family with him, and that's not what God wanted to do. So it was during that time that they were on their travels, that they were following the Euphrates River, and most likely that they were following Abram's father. He was the leader back then and was probably making a lot of the decisions. So it was along their journey that they decided to stop, and they decided to make their home there. Now, we can look at this and we could say, well, Abram now was out of the idolatrous nation, and he was in a place that was better than where he was before. So how bad could that be? Well, the truth of the matter is that Abram was better than where he was before, but he still wasn't in the place where God wanted him to be. He wasn't in his calling place. He was in a city that they decided to name after his brother that had passed away, and they were living there. So it was a constant reminder, I think, of Abram's past. He was living with his family. He was living in a place that reminded him of his family. And really, it wasn't the instructions that God left for him to leave everybody behind and to strike out on a path where God wanted him. So we don't know how long that he was in this city called Haran, but he left, and when he left again, it seems like he couldn't fully commit and trust to God, and when he left this city, that he took Lot with him. So now he's still traveling with Lot. And remember those decisions that we make that aren't exactly according to God's purpose. I mean, Abram could have made the excuse, right? I'm following God's will. I'm doing what God wants me to do by going, but he wasn't fully committed. See, that's the thing that we have to remember. It's not good enough just to be on the path, but we have to be going at the same speed that God wants us to go. We have to be following all the instructions that he wants us to follow. That we have to be fully committed. And it was just that question of Abram's commitment. And we could think about that in our own lives sometimes as, God, I'm going to church, what more do you want from me? Right? God wants us to be fully committed, just like he wanted Abram to be fully committed. So we see those decisions that Abram he made, and now Lot is traveling with him, and we know that Lot wasn't fully committed to God and his purpose. So strife happened between the herdsmen, and you read the story before, and now they had to have a discussion on what they were going to do because the land couldn't hold them both. And we know that because it wasn't God's purpose. And they had to have a decision, and they said, well, we're going to have to split up at this time. And of course, we know Lot, he looked towards Sodom, and he said, man, that looks really good. And eventually he was pitching his tent towards Sodom, and eventually he was in the gate of Sodom, and then he was living in Sodom. So we know that Lot just was making poor decisions. And so in the knowledge of God, God knew that he didn't want someone like that around Abram for what he wanted Abram to do. So eventually the strife happened, and they parted ways. And it was finally at that time where God was able to really start leading Abram. He had finally left his past behind. He had finally just looked out and trusted God, and God told him, look where you can see, and that's what he's going to get. And he could see the promises renewing of God, and that's what I think we should take away today. Sometimes we make bad decisions, sometimes we don't fully commit, but isn't it a good thing to know that God is still there with the promise, and he can still get us on the right path, and he can still direct us, and he can still guide us and lead our families. That's what God wants for all of us. Even though we make poor decisions, we make mistakes, you know what? God is still there for us. He's there for you this week, and I hope you remember that today. And join me for day 3 tomorrow. Thank you.